Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pitstick at soulproof.com talking about Am I a Christian? This is part 2. So I'm in theology school in the mid-70s and I'm learning the power of prepositions. For example, the statement, no one comes to the Father but by me. Okay, the preposition is by, implying that unless you accept Jesus as your personal Savior, you won't get to God, you won't get to heaven, you won't be saved. I learned though that those prepositions can be interchanged, so the interpreters could have just as likely used the preposition like instead of by. So consider the meaning then, no one comes to the Father but like me, or but as me. In other words, understanding that I and the Father are one, God is love, we should love one another, those great teachings in Christianity, but not the ones that don't make sense, that there is only one way and everybody else burns forever. I also learned that in our biblical history classes in theology school that there were actually very few documented pieces of evidence about the Bible, and that great theologians like Rudolf Bultmann and Paul Tillich and Bonhoeffer and others summarized that a person had to be a Christian on faith, not based on the evidence. So there just wasn't enough evidence out there. Every once in a while you'll hear about some archaeological dig and they'll come up with a name on a fragment of pottery and everybody gets all excited. That's really how little solid evidence there is. So it has to be taken on faith. Next, I learned about stories from other cultures that reflected that a personage like Jesus had visited there. Native Americans called it the Raven story, in which Native Americans, and had a oral tradition of this, were visited by what they described as a light-skinned visitor with hair on his face because they were beardless and holes in his moccasins, who taught them important principles. They called him, by the way, the greatest illumination from the east and the way shower, words like that. Other stories from Scandinavian cultures reflect the same sort of visitor, also in South America. And Joseph Campbell, the famous mythologist, reports that these Christ motifs, virgin birth, dying on a cross, the only Son of God representing the way to salvation, arose in many different cultures and different times independently. So this looks like then a teaching for humans that has surfaced in different ways in different times, not just from one person in one place in a certain time ago. Another thing to consider. So my current belief, there are two main ways a person can be a Christian. The first we've talked about. But the second way, actually, I find is much more common, but people of this type are more silent, what I call the silent majority. They're not so vociferous, not so fundamentalist. And that is believing that Jesus was a way shower, he was a Son of God, one of the highest spirits possible. And I'll talk more about this in the next segment. Very, very important. Don't want to rush it, want to give it its full time. So for now, be sure to visit the website, soulproof.com, free email newsletter. Send me your questions about this. One of my goals is to build a bridge between different religions and help us realize we're all barking up the same tree. We're all worshiping the same God. And hopefully we can see each other as brothers and sisters, not who's wrong, who's right.